What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really interesting knife from ZT. This is the ZT 0470 Sinkovich design. Before we get started here, I'm zoomed up a little bit on the camera. Let me know if you guys like this. Let me know if this view works for you better than the zoomed out view. I feel like maybe that's going to do the knives a little bit more justice when they're just sitting there and I'm just talking. I don't know. Traditionally, I've been zoomed out quite a bit, but let me know if this works better for you guys, and if it does, then I'll keep doing videos like this. Anyways, this is an awesome little knife. I have been interested in this knife for a very long time. I am a little bit late to the game on this guy. This has been thoroughly reviewed on YouTube, but let's go ahead and get started here with some specs. Overall length on this guy is going to be 7 3/4, it looks like. So it's going to be just shy, quarter-inch shy of 8 inches. How about the blade length? Blade length on this guy is going to be an impressive 3, and the cutting edge on this guy is going to be an impressive 3.5 inches. I think the way that it's lined up there on the frame, the total blade length is going to be about 3.5 as well. That's really cool. Blade length on this guy is awesome. How about the weight? Let's do that here real quick. Downside to zooming up is I can't show my entire scale. Let's do this here real quick. 3.25 ounces on the first one. Let's give it another go. 3.21, about 3 1/4. Let's call it 3 1/4. Great weight. Great weight on this guy. How about some size comparisons? Let's do a size comparison with the Ontario Rat Model 1, coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about the Paramilitary 2? PM2 coming in at 8.4 inches overall. How about the Benchmade Griptilian? Benchmade Griptilian coming in at 8 inches overall. And how about the Spyderco Delica coming in at 7 inches overall. So this is not, I wouldn't call it a large knife, though, I mean, I can still get my hand all the way around it. So you're looking at 7 3/4. It's kind of, it feels like a medium knife to me, but when you pick it up, you won't really expect to be able to get your whole hand around it until you pick it up. It's a knife like that. So this knife has intrigued me for a long time with its simple style. This is a very me style knife. If you guys are wondering like what attracts, like everybody has that style of knife or this silhouette or this shape where the moment they see it, it doesn't even really matter what brand it is. A lot of times it doesn't even matter what the materials are, but as soon as a knife pops up that's just the right shape, all those fireworks go off in your brain and you're like, oh, I want that. Before you even start considering whether or not the materials are what you want, But this is a very straightforward, in my opinion, it's a simple silhouette, and that's what I like. I like the simple, straight-looking knives, the drop point blades. Big fan of the way that this knife looks. And on top of that, it has some amazing materials, just absolutely beautiful all the way around. This is a very aesthetically pleasing knife. Now, before we get too far into this, I do want to say this. For whatever reason, and I knew what the measurements were. I knew, the blade length. The blade length kind of threw me. The specs online, I saw the overall length, and I thought, that's a great EDC size knife. I was expecting it to be bigger, not longer. I knew in my brain what 7 3/4 looked like, or whatever the official measurement is. But for whatever reason, the size of the knife itself, I just expected it to be bigger. And let me tell you, even me holding this right here is going to throw some of you who haven't handled it, because you're going to assume it's bigger. So again, let's take the Benchmade Griptilian and use that as an example, because I want to point this out. You see how much more material, more just heft the Benchmade Griptilian has compared to the 0470. It is almost exactly the same length, but there's just a lot more, there's a lot more chunkiness to the Benchmade Griptilian. And for those of you who are not looking for that, I think you'll be pleased with the 0470. For those of you who are looking for something with a little more chunkiness like the Griptilian, you are not going to find that in the 0470. So it's hard to like really put that into perspective on camera, because I had seen this knife so many times, and then it got to my house and I was like, what the heck? This is way smaller than I thought it was going to be. Not really, not that crazy, but it was, and it was surprising, you know. This was another knife that was provided by David. I made a suggestion to David that we should check this knife out. He very generously purchased it so that it could be reviewed on the channel. So thank you again, David. Really, I know it's like every single video for the last 3 weeks, it's been a David knife. And it's probably getting to the point where it sounds like I'm just reading off a script like, oh, this is another David knife. Thanks, David. Seriously, I cannot tell you, David, if you're watching, how appreciative I am that you are making this possible for this channel. It's exceptionally nice, and I really want to express my gratitude in that department. So thank you again. Anyways, let's go ahead and do the paper cut test. As always, the paper cut test is not a definitive cutting test. It is not designed to ultimately determine this knife's entire range of performance. Depending on what you're cutting, like, you know, if it's cardboard or rubber or wood, you know, all that's going to be different because paper is very, very thin. This is just designed to give the viewer a base understanding of resistance on a very thin, you know, day-to-day material like paper. So let's do 3 passes here. Well, that was a terrible first pass. How about that? There we go. It's very slicey. It's got a little bit more resistance than I would have thought on a blade that's as thin as it is. I'm going to do one more pass just to get a feeling of that. And I'd also like to take a pass with the PM2, having just done, yeah. Okay, so I would say it feels about 70%, 70 to 80% of what the PM2 feels like passing through that paper. I hope that gives you guys a decent reference point. There is a little bit more resistance than I thought there would be. But is it still performing very well? Yes, absolutely. You have to remember the Spyderco PM2 is kind of a slicing king. So I don't want anybody to judge this knife based on that. This is a knife that has a stock thickness that is pretty darn thin. In fact, we'll actually pull the Griptilian out again. You can see the Griptilian at 0.115. It actually appears to be a little bit thicker than the 0470. So it is a pretty thin stock, and that's kind of why I thought it would be a lot more slicey than this. But it seems like the final edge geometry is holding it back just a little bit for whatever reason. But still plenty good. I mean, let me emphasize that. It's still plenty good in terms of slicing. Let's go over the anatomy real quick. We have a very nice, slender drop point blade. You can see there ZT's beautiful satin finish. It's one of the best satin finishes that are out there. Those of you who have collected ZT knives, you'll know that especially on their 20 CV models, which this is 20 CV, the grind lines on a ZT actually have this sort of prismatic effect or this rainbow effect, you know, when they're in direct sunlight. And this is another one of those knives that has that effect in person, and it's just really, really nice. Blade is CPM 20 CV, has a nice swedge up top. Not anything really all that crazy going on with the blade, but really nice. They've got some nice normal jimping finally on the top of this blade, and I really wish ZT would continue with this trend, because this is exactly what I would want. I like knives with this flat area here. I like knives that have a ramp too, but it's this style of jimping that I really, really like. And I know oftentimes it is the maker of the knife or the designer that has an influence on exactly what that looks like. I'm talking mostly about like the ZT0909 from Les George. That jimping was kind of hilariously useless. It just, I mean, you know, it was there, and it kind of, you know, if you were wearing like, you know, heavy duty work gloves, maybe you could build up some traction on that, but it just really wasn't really that functional. And that's the way that it is on the mid-tech and the customs too. But, you know, if it's like if it's gonna be there, let's make it do something. And this jimping is functional, and I appreciate that. Moving down to the body of the knife itself, you've got a nice big pivot here, this black pivot. You can see here the chamfering on the titanium scales, all the lines and just the seams where this inlay is, this beautiful marble carbon fiber. There's a word associated with the reflectivity that comes with this style of carbon fiber. You can see there it almost has like an animated effect to it as it's moving and swirling around. I don't know what that word is. I've heard like Dr. Franke use it before. I want to say it starts with a C, but what I'm getting at is it's very, very beautiful. The machine work on this knife is so good, and it's very, very pleasing. If I can get my camera to zoom, I'll show you here. There are some lines in the titanium. You can see there these lines going horizontally down the body of the knife, and they're continued here after this angle. But all the angles and the chamfering and you know, that combined with you know, the lines and the machine work, what you have, the end result is a very, very beautiful knife and a very expensive knife. We'll talk about that too. This is a frame lock. You do have a steel lock bar insert, and it is running on bearings. The knife came perfectly centered. You have what I assume is an aluminum backspacer. It feels like aluminum. You've got a pocket clip that can be mounted left or right hand, tip up only. The over travel stop for this knife is the steel lock bar insert. It lips around the frame, as do you know, many knives of this style. The knife does flip reliably, kind of. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but it does run on bearings. What I think is interesting is actually the position of the stop pins, and if we can get, well, let me go ahead and zoom in again. Sorry, I've got a couple of light flares here, morning sunlight. So you can see in there's the stop pin. I said stop pins. That black bar right there is the stop pin, but the blade has this enormous cutout, and the stop pin sinks very deep behind the blade in the locked out position. And then there's another sort of hook. It almost looks like the blade is like a bottle opener, and that hooks around the stop pin in the closed position. Interesting. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, you end up with a situation where the stop pin is almost completely hidden inside the knife. Makes me wonder why they didn't just do the internal stop pin thing where the pin actually rides through the blade rather than taking out excess material. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. I wouldn't call this a hard use knife. I would call this, you know, a medium size, almost gentleman style folder that could probably handle a little bit more than that. This is definitely going to be a light to medium use EDC style knife. Not your typical ZT mega overbuilt hard use blah blah blah. Not really going to be like that. The knife is very easy to disengage, given that you've got this area right here for your thumb, and like I said, it does it flips semi reliably. You can see here the flipper tab, how it's designed. It just sticks out just enough there to get your finger on. So we are going to talk just a little bit more about that flipper tab. Before we do that, I want to talk just a little bit more about ergonomics. This knife has very, very impressive ergonomics, and I want to stress that before we go on here. Considering the blade length on this guy, 3.4, 3.5 inches, and the overall length of the knife and the silhouette of the knife, you know, and that's important, you know, when you're considering the footprint in your pocket. This is a very easy knife to carry. I'm not a huge fan of the pocket clip. It's almost like they finish the knife and they're like, it's beautiful. Oh, we forgot to put a pocket clip on there, and they just slapped one on there. That's what it kind of looks like to me. But it does the job. It carries. It's got good retention. I don't know. It works. It just looks lazy. But ergonomically, this knife is great. There are no hot spots. Not that I feel anyway. I don't know what other reviewers think. But this is a very comfortable knife to hold, and probably an excellent knife to use day to day. It does carry well. It carries light. You're getting a lot of blade, you know, for the weight that we're looking at here, which is, again, I think it's 3 1/4. So all of that is really, really great. There is one thing that kills this knife for me. Actually, there are two things, but functionally, there's one thing that kills the knife for me, and that's the flipper tab. I really, really do not like this flipper tab. It is so tiny, and the position of the jimping suggests that you might be able to both light switch it, which you kind of can, or push button it, which you also kind of can. But I had to practice with this knife when it first came in. I really did, because the detent it's not. I wouldn't call it light. I would call it kind of medium, which is not a problem when you have a flipper tab that's a little tiny bit longer or just shaped differently, because then you can get some better leverage. And I know on camera, there's people thinking like, what's this guy talking about? He's not having a problem flipping it. So if I was going to flip like the ZT-0560, I would put exactly this much pressure into it. And see, that's what happens with this knife. So I'm having to adjust and get ready and really like think about it when I flip it. I don't want to have to think about it when I have a flipper knife. I want to pull it out of my pocket and I want it to deploy every single time. I hate having to do this. I hate having to do that. I want it to flip, and I don't want to have to do this, the wrist flick thing. You will get used to it, I'll say that. And you kind of can do the light switch thing. But the detent is just a little bit too light, and the flipper tab is a little bit too nubby for it to really feel crisp. Like when like the 0562 and what's another good one? I forget the really long one that Nick Shabazz likes. That one's a great flipper too. I've owned that one in the Thai. But those are so crisp. You can hold those straight up in the air and flip it with your thumb, and it's going to deploy no matter what. And I love those, and they feel perfect. This one just doesn't have the right ratio of flipper tab design to detent. It just feels more like a chore, more like something you have to think about, than a convenient means of deployment. So it bothers me, and honestly, it's enough to where it makes me not like this knife very much. And I know that's really harsh. That's really mean, because this knife is beautiful. It's made with really nice materials. I love that marble carbon fiber. I love the design and the look of this knife. I love it. And I think for a lot of people, it is going to make an excellent EDC, and maybe if that flipper tab doesn't bother you as much, or you think I'm crazy, then maybe you will enjoy this knife a lot. But it just really bummed me out that flipper tab was the way that it was. It just doesn't quite feel right. Maybe mine's got a lighter detent, but honestly, I would keep the detent exactly the way that it was. If I had an option, if somebody, a designer from ZT or somebody from ZT and the head designer of this knife said, we'll make you another one. We can either change the detent or we can change the flipper tab. What would you want us to do? I would say, let's change the flipper tab. Maybe just give me a little bit more material up here. Obviously I don't need a flipper tab that's like way out here, but just a little bit more so I can get some more leverage on there. That's what I'd like. I don't think that a change like that would make this knife, exceptionally more obtrusive in the pocket. It needs a little bit more leverage. That's honestly what I think. I think the knife all the way around is an amazing design, other than that one thing. I really think it's beautiful. On the inside here, we do have some milling going on. So they took that into consideration. Let's go ahead and try and focus again. But you can see in there's some milling going on the inside of the titanium. Wonder if we can see it on this side. Actually, on this side, there's no milling. It's really just that front side of the scale. But this knife has everything that you would expect from an ultra high-end production knife. Titanium, carbon fiber, steel lock bar insert, over travel stop, 20 CV steel, beautiful finishes, beautiful machine work. I mean, this knife is the whole package. It's just, maybe that's why I'm being so harsh on the flipper tab, because it's so frustrating to me. It's like they were so close. I could choke down that pocket clip. If that flipper tab were a different shape, I would love this knife. It kind of, actually, that's interesting. The adjustment side for the pivot is on the other side. But it looks like, you know, in terms of the hardware, it's a pretty simple knife in terms of construction. So I imagine that taking this knife apart and putting it back together would be easy, which is another bonus for the knife. They were so close here, and it really the killing blow for this knife is the price on it. $260. Ouch. I understand, you know, this knife is made in the USA. There's a lot of intricate machine work, you know, adding an inlay, especially an inlay of marble carbon fiber. That's a lot of extra work. So, you know, I understand that it costs more money than other things in ZT's lineup that are using some of the same materials, but it's not quite as intricate. But you know, to me, some of those knives are a little bit overpriced as well. So it's really hard for me to choke down to, you know, $260 for this when the flipper tab doesn't work. If the flipper tab were different, you know, it would be a lot easier for me to swallow that price. I still wouldn't be super happy about it, you know, but let me put it this way. If this knife ran $225 and the flipper tab were shaped a little bit better or in a way where I could get more leverage, I would be losing my mind right now. I would be, you know, shouting the name of this knife on top of every mountain across the world, you know. But I can't do that. You know, I can't 100% recommend this knife. It bothers me just a little bit. It's really, really cool. And you know what? If you're on the fence about this knife and you watch this review and you're really hoping that I was going to say, you know, nothing but positive things about it, I'm really sorry. But if you really want to love this knife, and I've, you know, in the entirety of this video, I've given you enough reasons to pull the trigger, then go ahead and pull the trigger. You know, it's really up to you whether or not the knife makes you happy in the end. So don't let me stop you. I just wanted to be honest and give my my opinion and my experience with this knife. It will still serve you well in an EDC scenario. But I'm not convinced that most people are going to feel like they got $260 of a knife here, especially with that flipper tab situation. It just is kind of an annoyance. It doesn't give me the satisfaction that I seek out from flipper knives, especially from ZT, a brand that really has the flipper thing down. It was kind of disappointing. So anyways, that's going to be pretty much it for today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Fans of the 0470, I hope I didn't really bother anybody or really make anybody upset. If you love this knife already and you're an owner, you should continue to love it. Don't let me stop you or take away that fire. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there is definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.